Welcome to the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI podcast. I'm your host, Jordan Gospore, a health and science reporter. Join me as we cover advancements being made in health informatics and explainable AI for students, researchers, and healthcare practitioners interested in applications of artificial intelligence and machine learning. This podcast is produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI Research Laboratory at the University of Pittsburgh School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences Department of Health Information Management. Headed by Ahmad Tafti, Pitt HexAI Lab cultivates extramural collaborations with academic institutions both nationally and internationally through its research, educational contributions, and this podcast series.
Hello and welcome back to Pitt HexAI, a podcast series produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI Research Laboratory. I'm Brent Phillips, your guest host, and today we're going to speak with a very special guest, Fei Wang with Cornell University. Welcome, Dr. Wang. To get us started, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what got you interested in computational health?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am, by training, a machine learning scientist, actually. I got my PhD in hardcore machine learning. That was 16 years ago. And then I actually started working on machine learning and AI for healthcare since 2010. That's the year I joined IBM. I worked at IBM for 5 years. In 2016, I joined Cornell. And for me, I think you said computational health. On the computational side is natural because I am trained as a computational scientist. It's just later on when I work with, I want to see the real impact of my algorithmic research, so I need to pick an application area. I thought healthcare and medicine is something that will last forever, and it is super important, and it is a complex area to work with so that those algorithms can be really helpful. So that's essentially how I began to work on this.
I love that. What kind of work did you do at IBM? And it must be interesting to see how machine learning has evolved. And
yes. So when I was at IBM, certainly that was almost 15 years ago. And we, like today, I still work on electronic health records. I mean, in the past at IBM, we also work with electronic health records. And when I joined there, it was even before Watson won the Jeopardy challenge. So that was pretty early. And one of the representative projects I worked there is how can we leverage clinical data like electronic health records to assess whether two patients, they are similar to each other. So think about why that problem, we call it patient similarity analytics. So why that problem is important. Think about when doctors see patients, right? So they, look at the patients and see what, the patient reported and also what exams or outcomes that comes out. And then the doctor going to come up with a decision what to do with this patient. So how that decision was come out is really based on his or her knowledge about existing cases, either learned from textbook. Let's say if the doctor is still young or become more senior in the past, have I ever seen patients similar to the situation and what works and what doesn't work, right? So in actually doctor's mind, there's an implicit similarity, but certainly patients' conditions are complicated, and it is a lot of the times difficult for a single human to recognize all the complex scenarios. So that's why sometimes for a patient with complex disease, if he or she come to doctor with different specialties, maybe different decisions are gonna coming out. So we kind of try to mimic that using machine learning approaches and try to come up with a similarity assessment algorithms and build a actually user interface and also even the software on top of that, because it can have a lot of downstream application, decision support, a stratification, and even personalized treatment. That was one of the pretty important projects led to a lot of patents and also even a software product.
It's interesting thinking about that. Obviously, you had to develop synthetic data, test data and training data, and now it's more commonplace to work with machine learning models and data. And when you were just getting started at IBM, obviously it wasn't a new thing back then either, but tell me about the process, getting started on these projects.
Yeah, no, that was actually pretty new at that time when you talk about especially machine learning for EHRs. Maybe for genetics and genomics, not new, but for EHR, it was pretty new. So that was actually one of the reason why I decided to join IBM, because if you want to work with this clinical data, there is a pretty high barrier there. It's not like for every person, if you want to work on that, you can work on that because you need a data access, domain expertise, but IBM has that. So back to that time, so we have potential collaborators. I wouldn't say customers, but collaborators in health system that are willing to provide us access to their data and to do this pilot study. So that's how we get started.
That's a good point. IBM is so recognized that it's easier for you to knock on the door of a hospital and explain what you're interested in doing. Even back then, when it was kind of a new thing, electronic health records. I forget when that got started, but it wasn't so long ago either. And now it's still hard for research institutions, even Cornell here, probably to get the data that you want. I mean, you can get the data that you want, but there's still challenges involved. But do you think it's easier, like just starting a project, an arbitrary project, maybe looking at heart pathology or other pathologies? Like, do you still have challenges?
Yeah, I mean, challenge is universal. So it's hard to say which one is easier or no, because let's say if you want to start it, really you want to collaborate with a PI that have access to those data. Let's say if you want to study pathologies, maybe pathology lab where they already have access to rich pathology slides, and they may need your help on develop algorithm, then that's a win-win collaboration. But in general, it is pretty challenging.
And so tell us, what are you doing here at Cornell, and what are you working on this year?
Yeah, so I joined Cornell since 2016 and continue my research on machine learning for health. Like, if you ask what's the difference, in the past I work in a company, I don't need to worry too much about where to get those projects, just do the projects. Now in academia, so I need to think about what projects I can work on and where I can get the support and money, and how can I find the students and people to work on these. So, I think Cornell, the lucky thing is the environment here is so good. So we kind of like here at Weill, so of course we have our own, outpatient setup. I mean, we have a lot of excellent clinicians, but we also have affiliated hospital, New York Presbyterian Hospital, and also Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, hospital for special surgery. I mean, we're essentially just next to each other. So we have very rich resources in terms of data and expertise. And more importantly, Cornell set up a new campus right across the river at Roosevelt Island, Cornell Tech, so where you have world-class computer scientists and technical experts. So, I mean, altogether, this forms a very good ecosystem. And in New York City area, there are also a lot of health-related industries. So I think everything, I mean, resource-wise is really good. So, I mean, for me, I just continue my research on electronic health records with working with different clinicians like neurology, cardiology, and even recently COVID. But especially in recent 2-3 years, I go beyond that. In a sense, a lot of the times data just from clinical records is not enough to characterize the disease or the patients. So you need like genetics and genomics to understand the potential mechanisms, and you need like social environments to understand the potential public health impact. So I try to integrate more and more different types of data in my research and investigation, hopefully to come up with a better picture about more stratified or individualized health.
It's interesting because I was actually going to ask you next about electronic health records and what you would add to them, what new information fields you would add to them today based on the research capabilities of machine learning models and things like that. And I thank you for answering the question in advance. And what information do you find, if you could prioritize, what extra information to add to health records, or what should be standardly accessible to researchers? You mentioned genomic data, but like what other, like on a priority list, maybe what are your top 5 asks?
Yeah, I think it's hard to prioritize. It really depends on what problem you're studying. Like electronic health records themselves could be very important if, let's say, you want to study like billings and some policies and looking at the claims and EHRs, right? But sometimes, like when we work on like a treatment development or real world evidence for treatment development, then let's say you derived some hypothesis on potential drugs, there is some signal, but you may also want to investigate why there is such a signal. Then you need to look at the molecular level, right? And also sometimes nowadays, especially, a lot of the conditions are related not just to they're not just the biological or clinical factors, but like the environment, and we talk a lot about social determinants of health can impact the individual's health status a lot. So in that case, you may also need to integrate, like, let's say, a census data and also potentially like environment climate data to understand, why this happens in a more comprehensive way.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because I noticed that you're interested in public health and population health, and we've never interviewed anybody interested in those things on this podcast, and we've been looking forward to doing it. But share for us your background in those areas, and I think this is it's just great what you mentioned about looking at the patient from a kind of a macro level, outside of the context of their individual case, and where do they live, and what sort of environmental factors are they exposed to, and tell us about that.
Yeah. I'm not a public health person by training, but my department is called population health sciences. And a lot of the times when we say we work with big data, it's really population level. And hopefully we can derive insights about the diseases or conditions from really a large cohort of population rather than, on the very precise individual level. But I'm thinking that nowadays, especially more and more, I think, apparent that all these areas like public health, like bioinformatics, clinical informatics, all these areas begin to merge all together. So especially with recent years, the power of these complex machine learning models, it also becomes possible that those data, because these different areas, one angle to look at them is they look at different levels of data. So bioinformatics, more microscopic, like molecular level data, clinical phenotypic diagnosis, medications, whatever. Public health, more population level, like social, like environment, policy. So it's not separated. It's interconnected. But in the past, it's just impossible. We don't have the level of data that can link across the scales, and we don't have the power of tools that can do joint analysis. Now these things are becoming, I think, more and more realistic, and especially with the COVID pandemic is still ongoing, but as you can see, compared to the pandemics we encountered before, the power of these informatics and computation technologies on all those different levels, it's just amazing.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the future, and just imagine the sort of matrix of data that we're going to be working with in 5 years, and maybe 6 months. It's moving so fast. But what sort of future do you envision ahead of us that's amazing like that? Again, it's just looking at all these different data sources and the power of computing to work with this data and the sort of...
Yes, so I can talk about that because that's also one of my personal visions about, I set up my institute, and so what is kind of like the long-term vision, right? So I'm thinking that what I just talked about, a more holistic viewpoint. Doesn't matter if it's analysis, it doesn't matter if it's integration of resources. Biomedicine would be the future. You're just gonna see for different areas, you're going to see this holistic analysis in different timelines. But this is definitely going to be the future. I can give you some example, like pharmaceutical industry. So like, we have different steps, like from initial, like hypothesis generation, drug target, linkage prediction, to like molecule design, to preclinical studies like animal models, cell line experiments, to human clinical trials, phase 1, 2, 3, and then until finally a post-market surveillance about pharmacovigilance. So now you can see the innovations on almost every of these individual steps, but you don't see too much like sequentially link up all those different steps. But if you think about the efforts to put in a drug to become a successful one on the market, none of these steps can fail. Any steps fail, the entire pipeline fail. So it's going to be like a more holistic viewpoint would be like when you think about, let's say, molecule design, is there any feedbacks or insights from clinical studies? Now it's very rare. It's pretty much people just to design those protein or whatever structure. But I bet in the future, more like, a sequential or holistic thinking about these will happen. And this universally applies to all of these biomedical related areas.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. And, we're recording you live at Cornell. And, we're in an academic setting and thinking about the changes ahead of us and the changes ahead of us for private sector companies and large pharmaceutical companies and large medical device companies and testing companies that make diagnostic equipment. And it's interesting, how are they going to adapt to this new future?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, and how will they adapt, and what do you think their new products will look like? It's almost like there'll be a hybrid consolidation.
I think that's another example on the need of holistic thinking. So I believe, because nowadays, there are like innovations happening, academia, industry making products, and governments make policies. But a more holistic viewpoint is you need all those stakeholders in the ecosystem to make successful innovations. We do need like academics to be in, although nowadays it may not be the case because a lot of these complex models need the resource from industry, but you still need the smart mind from academics, from theory perspective on where to innovate, right? Maybe industry is good at scaling up and making them more complex, right? And then you need like industry to work with industry to, work out the products. Let's say for drug discovery, academics can design an algorithm, but we need industry's help to synthesize the molecule, right? So, and then after, let's say, what happened if those molecules are synthesized, you need to put them into clinical trials. Then you need help with health or clinical institutions, right? And then let's say after, the clinical trial is done, so when looking at the impact to the overall population, you need public health to monitor, like FDA, to monitor the potential side effect, and then give feedback to maybe even the original academic, who initiated the idea, designed the algorithms, think about improvement and maybe alternative ways, right? So this applies to anywhere. It's not the drug, but also medical device, maybe even policy. So I firmly believe this is something that healthcare differentiate from other industry, let's say computer vision or voice recognition. It's very different. So we need this ecosystem. There's no beginning, there's no end, but really get feedbacks from each other to make everything better and better.
Unlock the future of AI at Pitt HexAI. Pitt HexAI is where the brightest minds at the University of Pittsburgh come together to push the boundaries of artificial intelligence. Tune into the Pitt HexAI podcast to hear experts discuss cutting-edge AI research and its real-world impact. Join us at Pitt HexAI and listen to the podcast today.
Yeah, I was thinking about feedback loops, and imagine an MRI machine. Like, the power of machine learning models might inform the next advancements in MRI machines to create the data that models can process. So it's interesting to think about how that will impact.
Yes, I
device
mean,
makers.
I think if you talk about pathology and radiology, it's I think I would say more closer. I mean, in terms of the revolution, so it's not just you're gonna see machine learning algorithm integrated into their software, so they do not just produce the slides, but also analyze the results, right? But also, like there are various kind of challenges for the current device producing those images. They may have particular purposes, and good at one type of information may not be able to capture the other type of information. But now with these multimodal machine learning model, you can even link up all those different modalities. Think about using, let's say, more low cost and accessible ways to produce like high and information to understand the disease. I mean, all those things are already happening. So, but of course, you need to also look at, once it happens, you need to look at in the real world what's the impact. It's complicated because a clinician is going to use that, and that may impact their decision. And is this a good thing or a bad thing? Most of the people believe that's a good thing, but sometimes there's also unintended consequences. So we need to study that, and that may take some time. But still, you need to put all the stakeholders in the loop to study all these.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually thinking about that as well. We need more collaboration and discussion with private sector companies that are going to be using these things, and the medical device makers, and to get the feedback that we need in order to test this. And, one thing I'd like to hear about is your new center here at Cornell that you're going to be heading. Tell us about that, and tell us what are your plans for the future, and how is that relevant to these challenges ahead of us?
Yes, so my center is called AI for Digital Health. It's a Weill Cornell Institute, and it was launched at the beginning of last year, so it has already been 1 year. So there are three major goals for my institute. So one is on research, one is on implementation, the other is on commercialization of AI models for individualized health. So research is what and we just talk about like all those scientifically challenging problems, leveraging data analysis, digital health technologies. How can we, improve the understanding of diseases and treat patients better? And then, so one of the things that you see currently has been emphasized more and more is what's going to happen if we have those models. So you're going to need to put them in the hospital and see how it works and how that makes impact to not just the patients, but also all the stakeholders. So we are here, I mean, we have a great environment, so we can work with Newark Presbyterian Hospital. Actually, we already in discussion now implementing some, they already have a portfolio, and we are in discussion of implementing some of the promising models. Of course, before you made a decision, you have to thoroughly interrogated your model and make sure there's no unintended consequence. And then after that is, let's say, this is also an iterative process. So you develop a model, they implement the model, they see some outcomes, and they gave you feedback, you improve your model, so this can work better and better. But ultimately, once we build this pipeline, so this can also serve as a business model, like you said. So for all those private sectors who can make devices, who can make now softwares, right? So if they want to test, let's say it's not just as a test, because they may not, like academia, have also the mind about the technical innovation. So they may ask the feedbacks from both academia and hospital. Hospital, of course, they help for evaluation. So later on, this can become a kind of like commercialization or entrepreneurship type of innovation hub. So I think that's something my institute is interested in triggering on all those three aspects. And certainly, if you talk about the time horizon, I would say research is immediate, implementation is intermediate, and commercialization will be relatively long term, but I hope it wouldn't be too long.
Speaking about commercialization and the long-term nature of it, even though the outputs, we won't see them for years from now, potentially, obviously you still need to start collaborating with companies.
That's right.
Today and next week and tomorrow. And how do you get that across to companies that are a little bit timid about collaborating or don't know how to collaborate in this new landscape? What could you tell them to encourage them, to get them to understand how they need to start engaging with labs like yours?
Yeah, like now these universities, they all have those sub-organizations or, offices to help you with the commercialization and entrepreneurship. So companies who are potentially interested in looking for these type of academic engagement, they already have a list. So I would say, for at least for me, the most, if we talk about potential commercialization, the most straightforward first step is to talk to those people. But I'm thinking of for general, let's say if you talk about a startup, want to engage with the academic labs, you still need to talk to those people. And certainly a lot of times it happens like either it's from the members of a lab going out and set up a startup. So then you already have some ties. Sometimes they get an investment from the university commercialization office to get things started. Sometimes you got those SBIR, CTR grants from government. Then, they may have some suggestions on who to work with. So I think for now, it's not really a problem of identification of potential collaborators. It's really how can you filter them to identify the right one that you can collaborate with in the long term.
Yeah, that's a good point. On this podcast, we often focus on generating insight for students and students involved in research or looking ahead post-graduation to starting startups and things like that. But it's nice to talk to you about, your customer audience that would like to collaborate with Cornell. So thank you for sharing that. And back to students.
Sure.
You are a professor. We like to ask on this show any suggestions for students who might be interested in a research project idea. And what are you personally interested in? What are you excited about these days? And give us an idea of a project that you would love to see a student work on.
Yeah, sure. I'm thinking for, if you talk about AI in medicine or AI in healthcare, so by nature, this is the interdisciplinary field. So if you are a student interested in working on this, you have to realize, so you need to not just develop fancy machine learning algorithm, but you also need to solve real world problems. So that means that you can be a medical student and you need a lot of expertise or mentorship on technical side, or you can be a machine learning student, but you need a lot of mentorship on the problem or the medicine side. So it won't be like a single person or single area efforts. So in terms of projects that I would like students to work on is really my team. We have two types of people. So one is they still work on innovative algorithm development, but the motivation should come from real world medical problems. It's not like thinking in the wild. Or the other way around, I have people work on solving real world biomedical problems using machine learning tools, but they need mentorship from machine learning people telling you which is the right tool and how to design. So I think both ends are okay, but I think what I want to emphasize is the interaction between those two worlds. In the past, maybe there's not too much interaction, but now with this field, interaction is a must.
On this podcast, we like to ask our guests about explainable AI, explainability, and your views on that. But before we get to that, one last thing about students. How's AI education changing? We are in a kind of a whole new world is sort of materializing, and how should we be preparing new students for this new age?
I think certainly we have to be, as an educator, we have to be aware of all those tools and the new potential thing. Now we have to put in our syllabus warning students, you cannot use ChatGPT in this or that, right? So we have to be aware of that. And on the student side, so let's say ChatGPT can be a good thing in a sense of like helping you polish your grammar, your language. But it can also be a bad thing. Students just use that to generate codes instead of writing codes on their own. I would say we don't want students to rely everything on ChatGPT. It will be a disaster. But I'm thinking of at the same time, like with the power of the generative AI models, lots of the things can be done either not just with ChatGPT, like I'm thinking of the VR stuff. Like medical students, you can, in that virtual reality to see the patients and kind of like in the real world, do some operations. So those are fantastic. So I think really embracing the technology and realize the potential, I wouldn't say threats, but risks as educators or professors setting up the boundary. So what is allowed, what is not allowed. And for students, realize why you are learning something. Don't just think of them as tools to help you get in good grade. You have to think about what happened after that. What's going to happen if you use use ChatGPT for everything, and then what's going to happen to your job interview, let's say, right? So realize this, and the smart leverage of those technologies can definitely be helpful.
It sounds like you've given this lecture to students. Yeah, it's good for them to realize that, because these are amazing tools, and it's good to understand, again, like computational health, and understand the computation side of computational health better. And, in all disciplines, I think we all need to have a computational component.
Right.
But we still need to get an education and learn how to do things.
Right, exactly.
So thank you for sharing. And it's interesting. I'm fascinated by graph databases and graphing data. And you mentioned VR, and maybe the future will be, speaking about explainability, we'll be able to view graphically how we can explain it. And maybe this is the future of explainability.
Yeah, but see, it's good you mentioned that. So this is actually a great example on the potential unintended consequence of using these fancy technologies to do model explanation. Because a lot of the times, the model cannot be explained by itself. You need to do some post hoc explanation, visualizing how it works or some way. But a lot of times it comes with a potential bias. When you do the explanation, you make some hypothesis. That's when you work out the algorithm. And a lot of the times people have studied, and essentially we say this explanation makes sense. It's essentially you want the explanation to align with your expectation. So is that really an explanation? Who knows? For the things we already know, we know it is correct. But most of the time, think about utilizing an algorithm in the real world. Why do you need explanation? It's because you don't know if it is correct or not. In that case, there's nothing you can align with. So then potentially your existing explanation method could be biased. So it's only when you understand how the explanation was worked out, then you can know what is the potential risk and whether this is an appropriate method or not. Not just by those visualizing those fancy graphs, right? So I think it's a perfect example. We need the knowledge to smartly utilize the technology.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we could come up with an example. What's your process for thinking about explainability and machine learning models and research? And what's your process for just starting a research project and thinking it through and maybe doing some training and testing and fine-tuning? And how do you incorporate explainability in that?
Yeah. No, I think explainability typically is not a huge problem for my study, because for every project, we have a clinician work with us day by day. So if they don't understand, the model won't went through. So through that process, we kind of like using different, methods to make sure they can demonstrate what they want. So that's why I said it's important to get domain expertise in all these kind of projects. But in general, it's not just on working with clinicians. We also want to make sure something we work from one data set can work on another data set. And a lot of times this is not possible given the fact that the distribution discrepancy is everywhere. So if the generalizability cannot be guaranteed, so how can we do the adaptation so that it can quickly converge to a status on another data set, it can work well. So I think this is we can say reproducibility, generalizability, robustness, whatever you want to call. But nowadays, if you want to submit or publish on those top-notch journals, this is almost required. So you cannot just show my model on one data set works well. You either need to show prospectively you implemented that and show in the real world it can still work well, or on a diverse set of other external sites can work well as well.
Well, thank you so much for that. We appreciate that. And it's great to have an expert in explainability here to talk to us on this podcast. We usually close the interview by just asking if you'd like to give a shout out to any of your students, or maybe you'd like to share any conferences you're going to be participating in soon, or tell us about your new center and what's on the agenda.
Yeah, no, of course. I think that's a good point. So for my institute, we have a monthly seminar series. So if you follow me on Twitter, we did announcement pretty regularly, and I try to get all the top-notch AI and medicine researchers to talk in our monthly seminar series. So we have clinicians, we have machine learning experts, and I think that's a pretty good opportunity to listen to how these people do their research. And our next seminar is on Wednesday from a world-class cardiologist. And in terms of conferences, we actually have a conference called CHIL, CHIL, that will be happening at the end of May right here at Cornell Tech. So this year, Marzia and Matt, who are from MIT and Harvard, will be the general chair, and me and Irene, who is from Berkeley, will be the program chair. And that's a good forum, yearly forum for students working on machine learning for health to share their ideas and listen to the trend, and also talks from top-notch researchers.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Wang. It's been a pleasure to interview you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks everyone for tuning in and for following the show. The Health and Explainable AI podcast is produced by the University of Pittsburgh's Health and Explainable AI Research Laboratory at University of Pittsburgh School of Health and Rehabilitation Sciences Department of Health Information Management. I'm Jordan Gospore. Thanks for listening.